Hey guys, welcome back to our Small Business Spotlight live stream. Today we have my good friend and fellow coach, Reem Libleed Tyson. Reem, say hi to folks.
Hi, everybody. Thanks, Drew.
Of course. Glad to have you. Thank you so much for joining. I'm excited to be here and talk about this today because one, it's always fun to talk to other coaches, and even more fun to do that publicly. So Reem, you got actually a really cool background, a really interesting background that you have. It wasn't a quote unquote traditional path like I think a lot of folks are finding out these days. But do you want to tell us more about you and your background, like how you got into coaching and where you're at right now?
Sure. Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining. I'm Reem Labib Tyson. I do a lot of things. I live in Washington, D.C. I come to coaching from an education background. So I've been in the ed space for over 20 years now. I started out as a teacher. I was a principal. And I tripped and fell into consulting in 2010. And then I tripped and fell again into coaching officially in 2019. So um, I think just, one of the things Drew and I were talking about was like, what do what would I be able to like offer? I think one of the things I would love to sort of dig into a little bit is just the path to entrepreneurship, um, especially how it can be accessible for anyone, even if you don't have like a business background or you don't consider yourself a business person.
Yeah, absolutely. And a lot of folks who become entrepreneurs are not business people, right? I mean, they don't, at least they don't start out that way, right?
That's right.
Um, but the other thing I want to talk about too is as you did this, like what were the challenges, big challenges you faced? Because you're a mother, you're also, you're also you were a full-time employee at one point in time, you're a full-time consultant, right? Making that transition, first of all, from education to consulting, right? And then from consulting to coaching, what
Yeah.
was that like? I mean, tell us what that experience was like for you.
Um, so the education to consulting, uh, it was 2010. I ended up, I was working full time. And when I say I tripped and fell into it, a colleague of mine went to work for the state office, which was new in DC. And they needed school improvement consultants. And she reached out to me. And it was one of those things that like, I, I ended up taking a huge leap of faith and leaving my job and doing that work. I mean, essentially it was like full time, but it was consulting. And while I was doing that, I was also involved in doing like some other work for somebody else. And I just decided that there was so much about it I liked. I liked the flexibility. I liked the work. I liked, having my hands sort of in different things. And I stayed up all night one day in the summer, that summer, and I built a website and I made up a name. Um, and I crowdsourced the logo. I got business cards because that was still a thing, I think, in 2010. And then that's when I was like, well, now I'm legit because I have all these things that make people legit, which I know is different from now, but it was almost like that would be like the differentiator if I'm like talking with someone like, yeah, I have a website, you have a business card. And all it really was still just me, but it was like, how do I present myself in a way that like is accessible to others. That's what it came down to.
Yeah, no, that's so funny because it's like, as an entrepreneur, you that's the entrepreneur experience, right? It's like what is enough to make me like legit, right?
Yeah.
What's the point where I feel like I'm enough, I'm good enough, I can be like, oh yeah, here's my business card, I'm this person now, that was exactly my experience as well. Like in 2010 was starting my first company was exactly that. Like I stayed up the whole night doing my website. I was super proud of it when I was like, yeah, I got the website, looks good, looks cool, everything functions well, pages or whatever. And then I got my business card design. I did that whole thing. I got a logo. It was just like, that was a sense of accomplishment because I'm like, now I can hold myself. And I'm real. I'm a real entrepreneur now,
Right.
right?
Right.
And then you get into it and you're like, wait, there's all this other stuff I have to do. Like there's like there's bookkeeping, there's CPA stuff, there's like keeping track of actual stuff you're doing, there's workflows, right? Like when I got my first client, and I was like, wait, what how do I get this? Okay, now I got to do a contract. Like shit, I forgot about the contract thing. I can do all this other stuff. So yeah, I totally get that adjustment. And then you have to adjust again. You tripped and fell into coaching, right? So how'd you come across coaching?
Um, so what's interesting about this shift to coaching is I would say that, Andrew, you shared this with me before, so I feel like I got this from you, but I've been coaching without a license for a very long time. Um, I mean, I was a school principal, and then as a consultant, like a lot of my consulting work shifted into coaching. I've even been hired to be a coach, but never actually knew like what coaching was in this way that I know how to coach now. I just knew I was always interested in that work. And so again, like when we talk about taking a leap of faith, like I essentially signed up for a couple programs. I got in and didn't know what coaching really was until I was like in the program, which seems ridiculous. Like it seems ridiculous to invest time and money and, effort into something that you're not really sure about. But I also don't know that, I'm not sure there's a better way to really be sure about that unless you've like maybe had a coach and like been researching coaching. That's sort of where I've landed, where I feel comfortable saying that. So that's kind of like what brought me to this point, and figuring out a way to like, I really was curious about coaching folks outside of my industry. Because so like when my pro bono clients, when I was at Georgetown, I made sure they were not even education like adjacent. I really wanted to be certain that I could do it without knowing their context. And I actually thought that was much easier because I didn't know their context, to be able to coach someone.
Yeah, it is surprisingly easier. I mean, because when you're in the same field, you get caught up in the details. You're like, oh, well, here's how you do that, and then you get caught up into like the consulting side of things as opposed to the coaching side of things, right? You get like into like advice mode. At least I do personally, and it's like, oh no, you shouldn't do that. You should do it this way. This is the way you want to do that, and this is how that worked out for me in the past. Because obviously, what works for me is going to work for you, right?
Right.
We get caught up in our own stories.
Well, and people want you to solve their problems, and like I'm pretty good at doing that, but that's not what this is, and like that wasn't the purpose of it. So it was just like it was a shift.
Yeah, no, and that reminds me of actually a song lyric. It's just this idea, like I told the story without knowing the ending. And it's a really powerful idea because it is at the end of the day a leap of faith, right? It's like it's a really cool concept, right? And it's just like, yeah, I mean that's entrepreneurship in a nutshell, right? I mean, and it's you're taking a leap of faith, you're focusing on yourself, and especially when you leave your full-time job for that kind of thing, that's a huge leap of faith, and that's awesome you did that. Not everyone can do that effectively, and yeah, Rahul, thanks for joining in, man. Appreciate the comment. Hang on, when my buddy just joined and said React topic. Thanks, man. Appreciate it. But yeah, so then when you got into the coaching world, you did something really cool that I think is really cool anyway. And you started something. You want to tell us more about that? I'm being very vague on purpose.
You're being brave on purpose?
I'm being vague on purpose. Yes.
Yeah, oh, sorry. I thought you said brave. I was like, I don't. Okay.
No, vague. Sorry.
So I completed my coaching program in December 2019. Well, let me back up. So I started the coaching program in summer of, I guess, 2019. And I noticed very quickly that there was, and I texted my friend, like within 20 minutes of being in class, and it was optics. I looked around, I was like, oh, like this is not a very like ethnically diverse space. Mm-hmm. That's fine. And then sort of, fast forward to like the end of my program, I realized a couple of things. One, I surely didn't bring my whole self to class, which is kind of sad because one, I'm a grown up, and two, like I invested a lot of money and time into this, but it wasn't on purpose. And three, and it wasn't just my classmates; it was also like my instructors. And so in the summer of, in the throes of the pandemic, I decided to like rebrand and relaunch my website, just kind of scrub it a little bit and make it, just change it up a bit to include coaching. And I was like, I would love to find like 8 or 10 coaches that are people of color that want to talk coaching and entrepreneurship. And we didn't read anything or that was written by an author of color. We didn't, coaching was never modeled for me by someone who at least that I don't want to say looked like me, but looked like me. So it didn't feel like it was made for me. So I thought maybe if I can get a small group of like, a handful of folks together that we can just like talk and learn and grow. So I threw together a Google Doc, I put it online and people started signing up. So I named it the BIPOC Coach Collective. And then people started signing up for this thing, and I created a Facebook group and went ahead and created a LinkedIn group. And, I guess with anything with entrepreneurship, like you just sort of keep doing things and see what sticks. And I guess, March 2021, we have, I don't know, maybe 130 people that have joined, that are members from around the world at this point. Most of the folks are from the US, but we are like tapping into, other countries, which is very exciting. And it really, like, the purpose was just to create a brave space for coaches of color to learn and grow and like collaborate.
Yeah, and it's awesome. As a member, I think it's awesome. So, I mean, having participated in those meetings, I think, it is that space. It is that free space where you're able to bring your whole self and not be, worried about toning things down or saying the wrong thing or saying things in such a way people don't necessarily understand the experience behind it. And it's a really powerful space, honestly. And, to your earlier point, I mean, it's painfully obvious to coaches of color, at least, I remember at my 2017 was the year I graduated from Georgetown, finished the program, whatever you want to call it. We never had a ceremony, but that's that fall I went to the Capital Coaches Conference, which is ICF's DC area conference. People come from all over the place for that conference. Content wise, it's pretty cool. But I noticed, and a bunch of my other coaches from my cohort noticed, shout out to 52, best ever. We noticed that there were no speakers of color, not even one, right? Like zero. And you flip through the book and it's everyone was white. And it's like, okay, interesting. I'm pretty sure that there's not only white coaches out there who are doing things worth talking about. And it was really just kind of like off-putting in a way. And we talked to ICF about it briefly, and it was just like one of those things where they were like, oh yeah, and then it was almost like a reactive thing, right? Oh, well, let's create the ICF DC were the ones who put on the conference. They're like, let's create a what was the word that they used? Essentially a task force to focus on this and look at this and be like, let's really investigate, what's going on. And I'm like, okay, cool, yeah, but then what's going to come out of that? Like, how do we actually action this? It's not about investigating. It's clear. There's no investigation really needed. It's like data's right in front of you, right? So let's just do something about it. How about that? And I'm not blaming ICF or ICF DC or anything like that. It's just something to notice. I don't think they did it intentionally, right?
No.
But that's the whole point. It's like, it's not intentional. It's a bias thing. It's unintentional, unconscious bias, right? And it's something that happens, right? And even happens among coaches, we're the ones who need to have these kind of discussions. And I'm part of a coaching group that I won't necessarily mention. You're part of the group as well, Reem, because you saw this email as well. And then an email went around last year talking about some of the diversity, equity, inclusion practices that were going on in the federal government and the implications thereof. And there was a lot of pushback. There was some pushback to this email being circulated in the coaching community. I mean, like, oh, this is not the place for politics. That's not really politics, though, because that policy influences people's lives, right, across the board. And I think actually you were the one who shared the article, I believe, right, if I remember clearly, or maybe you at least commented on it. I can't remember who shared it initially, but
I commented. I wasn't going to, and I was like, I have nothing to lose. I mean,
yeah, no, same here. I mean, I commented too.
I'm not trying to start stuff, but I'm also not. I just refuse to be quiet.
I mean, I kind of start stuff sometimes, but that's a different conversation.
Anyway, but that's.
but no, it's exactly right though. I mean, it's a conversation worth having, right? It's a conversation that needs to happen. Yeah. And my thought immediately when I saw the response from that one coach was, if this is not the space to have this conversation, if we as coaches can't have these conversations, where is the space, right? Is there a space that doesn't exist among us, right? And it's a really frustrating thing that kind of viewpoint exists even in coaches who are supposed to be the ones who are like bringing awareness to these things, bringing these things up having the uncomfortable discussions, right? So people don't have to necessarily have them as much.
Right.
But
I mean, one of the things I forgot, which, I was speaking to a coaching company that's based in Australia. Mm-hmm. The woman said to me, it's hard to soon inappropriate. She said, it's hard to find colored coaching. And like, I had to pick up my jaw off the ground. did she just say that? So I wrote it down because, you know, when you like, I literally wrote down what she said.
Yeah.
And I was like, and I didn't respond in the moment. And I wish I had, but sometimes you can't because you like are like, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
And that was like yet another reason. Obviously, I didn't work with them, and I was also told that like that's what they use there, and all that is like nor here nor there. But, and I did share with her that like that was like inappropriate. But that was like the other reason because I was like, well, it can't be that hard. Let's figure this out, you know. Anyway, it's just I feel like there's so much that we can sort of say about that and like what there isn't available, but that's why I was like, I know there's other people that are out there and I'm going to find them. And then we'll figure out what to do with one another when we find each other. And it didn't take very long. And I really wasn't looking to create a space for like, for people, forgive me, but for people to like emote. And when I say that, I just mean we all have friends, we have therapists, we have coaches, like we all have like that space. I was looking for a place where we can establish like a relationship and rapport, but really like do the work, you know, like, hey, I'm working on this thing, like who has expertise around this area, or there's an opportunity at this company, you know, and that's people that you can win, you know, kind of like a lot, like taking it like a level deeper than just a place to like, commiserate. And I'm not saying it in a negative way, but that's the only word coming to my brain. And I will also say prior to doing that, I searched for other groups. I wasn't able to find, I come to find out there are a few other groups out there, but I couldn't find them easily. I reached out to ICF as well. And, you know, I've reached out like to a couple other orgs just to say like, you know, to ask questions, just to do some like research. And the responses I got back were either people saying like we don't have or questioning what I was doing. So I was like, okay, again, but if you're questioning it, it means there's a need.
Right.
And if it's making you uncomfortable, that's my assumption is you're uncomfortable. That's a problem. And I also have to say, I did hesitate initially about doing this because I wasn't like, I'm not trying to create any divide. I just, you know, I'm like, if this is where I'm going to be spending my time and energy, I'm not going to try to fit in somewhere. Like, I'm too old for that. No, I don't fit into anyone's anything.
No, exactly. And I like what you said about it, because it is absolutely not a place to commiserate or to kind of just sit there and air dirty laundry or be upset or whatever. And it hasn't been, which I appreciate a lot. And that's actually one of the things I really appreciate about the group is it's still a coaching group. It's still about coaching. It's not like, oh, you know, woe is us, you know, here's whatever. It's really like, hey, here's what I do. Here's what you do. How can we help each other to grow, right? How can we help each other in our businesses and really have a place to talk about that stuff and talk about business stuff, right? With business related stuff, what business looks like in our world, right? In terms of things we can go after and that kind of stuff. And, you know, to your other point, which is the discomfort thing. I mean, some people are going to be uncomfortable with things that they don't necessarily understand, and that's okay. That's their journey. That's their thing to deal with, you know. But I think, like you said, it's not about that. It's about having a place where you can bring your full self, right? And really come forth and say, hey, I got this contract and X is happening, or I didn't get this contract, and let's try to figure out a way to bounce back from that makes sense for us, right? Because it's not necessarily, again, it's not just to create this divide, but it's really about a place of, frankly, the opposite, which is unity, right? Among people of color who can coaches of color who can come together and collaborate, right? So
yeah, and something that would continue to come up in the group was like that people kept getting tapped for like DEI B or DIJ work, and they're like, that's not what I do. So I just found that interesting too, that like those are the types of roles that continue to come up for a lot of folks in the group. And that's it was just, if anything, like, and I'm saying again, like I'm saying it out loud, but nice for people to be able to sort of share that out loud without just feeling safe to share something like that. And also feeling people have been sharing like opportunities that, you know, they're almost like vouching for other people in the group that they don't know, but they're being comfortable. They feel comfortable enough to do that. So like put opportunities in front of people that they might not have had access to.
Yeah, and it's really about, and that's really what it is about, right? I mean, ultimately, in any real community, especially business communities, it's about creating opportunities and passing on opportunities where things are possible, right? Like, how do we grow together? Because I mean, look, one thing I did love about the coaching community, regardless of what, is that the idea that most people in the community feel that all ships rise with the tide, you know, and it's really about helping each other to grow and build, and really a matter of keeping that momentum going in the community as a whole, right? And changing the way that the world kind of sees coaching, because as you and I both know, first of all, people don't know what the heck coaching is. Second of all, people who think that they know what coaching is may not actually know what coaching is, because they're associated with folks who may not be actually certified. And
Right.
coaches who are just coaches by name, like they decided one day, hey, you know what, I want to be a coach.
Right.
I've been through this one situation that sucked, yeah, but I got through it, so now I'm going to be a coach because that situation qualifies me to be a coach. No, you're just a human being who may be
Right.
able to help other people, but doesn't mean you're a coach.
I mean, I also think that because of sort of where I started the conversation around, like, I didn't feel like this space was made for me. Something I questioned, and I questioned deeply, was the language that was used. And I would push back a lot and say, but I don't talk like that, or that's not,
Mhm.
like, I would never use a phrase like that. And, you know, again, like, it's, yes, I was a beginner. Yes, I was feeling vulnerable, but I also knew that that wasn't it. Like, there wasn't just one, and I was told, like, okay, well, make the language work for you. And I said, okay, but it would have been wonderful to have other language presented that was an option, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, some of the language is just, I felt the exact same way, and I gave the same feedback that, like, I would never say it like that. I would never say that phrase or in that wording or in that way, right? And not only that, but the people I associate with would never be able to
Right.
connect to
Right.
that wording, right?
And it feels inauthentic to speak that way.
100%. Yes. And you can't be vulnerable if you're being inauthentic. Those two
Right.
things are mutually exclusive.
I'm going to trust you if you don't seem comfortable.
Yeah, or if I can't relate to you, right? Like, if I'm going to a client and I'm saying stuff that, or in a way that, first of all, feels inauthentic to me, and second of all, it doesn't appeal to them and does not connect with the way they're talking or they think.
Yeah.
One, I'm not going to get the client. Two, they're not going to be able to relate to me. Three, they're going to feel that I'm inauthentic and they'll be like, "What's up with this guy? He's weird."
Yeah.
Right. So I mean, there's so many levels that affects you on, right?
Right. Um, the other thing I think about is, when you think about executive coaching, who gets it and who's providing it. Um, that was something else too, that I was like, the image that many of us have is not what we see in the mirror.
Mhm.
So how do we, shift that on purpose? And, like, how do we put ourselves, like, in front of all of these, like, opportunities on purpose? Um, so that's something else that's just been, like, top of mind too.
Yeah, and how do we change for each other too? How do we put each other in front of these opportunities that may not be right necessarily for us?
Yeah.
Like, for someone coming to me who does, I mean, I do some DEI work, but I don't deal like massive DEI work,
Yeah.
right? If
Yeah.
someone comes to me for that, I can refer to someone else in our group, or in that I know through the community that actually does that kind of work, right? And but to your point though, that there is that assumption, they're like, oh, you're a coach of color, so that means you must obviously automatically do DEI work, and
Yeah.
it's like,
I should.
no, not always, like,
Yeah.
sometimes you're just coaching. Like,
Right.
so you talked a little bit about the journey there and that kind of thing, and where you are right now. So, and you mentioned, I know briefly you mentioned about this future of like the coaching that you wanted to do for yourself and for the work that you're doing right now. I want to talk just briefly about that. I know it's a very, very high level right now, but in terms of what your high level goals are in the future.
Oh, where am I going?
Yeah.
um, so when I first started coaching, which, mind you, was like, yesterday. It's like not that long ago. I heard, actually, there was a panel, a virtual panel, and you were on that panel, Drew. And there was you all said some, like, powerful things, and one of the messages I got from that was, if you don't have to choose a niche, you just coach everyone until you sort of figure it out. And that really resonated with me, because that's kind of how I learn. Like, I just sort of like, I sort of always think about, like, an octopus. Like, I like to be, like, all over the place until I sort of figure out what that is. But I also feel comfortable being, like, a generalist. I also feel comfortable not saying I only do this or I only do this. And a theme that continues to pop up for me is I have this like really deep passion around supporting career moms, career women, like women who are like badass at work and are moms or parents, and like how to figure out that, how to figure out that space, because it's really hard. And I don't know that, like, how do so what I'm doing is I am creating that space. I am creating an offering. There'll be other ones too, like just for entrepreneurs. And, but I just think it's like such a powerful space that women need, to sort of figure out their next move, like whether they have a very young child or even older child. I mean, it's that constant like push and pull. And for those of us who, like me, like career is very, very important to me. And being a mom is like very important to me. So how do I make all of that work?
Yeah.
That's like what's been bubbling up. And I was like, I have to do this because I can't stop thinking about it. So, coming.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. And I think that that's really powerful. I think it's honestly, I think it's needed too. I mean, just even that the group network, the network that you could create out of that. I mean, for folks, the support that they would get out of that is massive, I think, and as a doggy dad, not a mom at all, like it's not even like, I can't even comprehend the level of challenges you guys have and the things that you guys have to deal with on your end of things. As a guy in general, I mean, there are single dads out there, sure, absolutely, but there's also a lot of single women who are dealing with this stuff, and women who are not single who are still dealing with this stuff and dealing with being a mom and balancing that with being a parent and trying to be both. Plus, especially nowadays with COVID, you have kids at home all the time where you're trying to do your job and they're trying to get the kids on Zoom and everything. I mean, there's just so many layers of that I think are really powerful. And, speaking of badass women, I know a ton of badass women who will be probably awesome for your program. I know my mom would have benefited from something like that in the past. She was a badass woman she still is a badass woman for the most part. Sometimes too badass for me, but but it's one of those things where it's like the fact that those groups have not existed before, one should not be a barrier for them not existing in the future. And second is like, it's an untapped market in some ways, right? I think people in general just are not thinking that way. And I think that's awesome. And to your earlier point about the niche, I'm glad you found something that you can't stop thinking about, because that's awesome. That's the kind of niche you want to be able to get into, right? And for those coaches out there who are aspiring coaches or coaches in school or studying right now, what I said was exactly what Reem said, is you don't need to necessarily pick a niche right now. If you have one, great, absolutely, jump in and do it. That's what you want to do. You know what you want to do, great, you're ahead of the pack, right? But in terms of the people who don't know what they want to do, that's also okay, right? Take some time, figure things out for yourself. You don't have to choose a niche immediately the day after you graduate or leave school, and that's true of high school too. For students in school, it's something where it's like, you don't have to necessarily choose your major the day you leave high school, Right. Candria, thanks for tuning in as always. You got a comment from Candria there.
Oh, thank you. I'm glad it resonated, and I sort of wish it didn't. But I know, I get it. And when I said like badass, like women, I really am talking about like all women are badass. I'm talking about like, like career driven women who like, like who want all the things, and they should have all the things. So how do we make that work? And honestly, how do we do it unapologetically? And how do we do it without the guilt? Because one thing I tell people all the time, I was like, I have great work-life balance. I'm like, well, how do you do that? I said, I put myself first, and I'm unapologetic about it, because if I don't take care of myself, I cannot take care of anyone else. And I make that very clear. And it sounds arrogant, and I don't care.
No, it doesn't.
No, but I'm saying, like, when you say it, people are like, oh, and I'm like, think about it. If I don't take care of myself, how can I take care of my family? How can I take care of my job? I cannot.
So I'm gonna coach you for a second, or coach this, because it's a story. It doesn't sound arrogant. It's just because they haven't thought about it or put themselves first yet. They're not used to it. So it's not arrogance. It's just surprise that, oh, it's okay to do that. And by doing that, you're setting an example, which is awesome.
Sure. No, you're right. You're right.
But no, it doesn't. I mean, from this point of view, it doesn't sound arrogant at all. If folks watching, please let her know if it sounds arrogant. I doubt anyone's going to say it does. I
Oh,
think it sounds like you're taking care of yourself.
I'm saying it's like I'm okay with it sounding arrogant because the other thing too is I think quite frankly a lot of times people aren't used to hearing that. They're used to hearing the other side of things, as a parent, and not the fact that I'm like, no, I got to handle my business first, meaning myself and and then I can do everything that comes with that because it makes me a better mom. It makes me a better entrepreneur. Like it makes me a better everything. Like, if I fill my bucket, I can help fill yours, but I can't do that if mine's depleted, period.
Or if you have a leak in your bucket, you can't fill anyone's bucket, right?
So always happy to sort of talk about that too. And it's not perfect. Like there's, I have my moments and my days. I'm like, but it's a constant effort. One other thing when you were mentioning about when we were talking about the niche with coaching also, I think, and I know we sort of bounced all over all these different topics, but I think something that if anyone's like a new coach or thinking about coaching too, is just like take your time. There's like a lot of like strange pressure around like you have to get certified in all these things and you have to do all these things and doing all these things and keep paying all your money. It's like, no, don't do any of those things. Just slow down, coach everybody, figure it out, and it'll come. But I sort of think that's the same thing with entrepreneurship really is like, if you're passionate about something, you'll figure it out. And you'll figure out how you best learn and like who to put in your corner.
Yeah, no, I couldn't have said it better. I love it. I mean, I do a lot of time preaching about, and I don't try to preach, but it's speaking about resolve versus, knowledge, right? Or skills. It's like, you can always gain skills. You can always gain knowledge. There's so much knowledge out there. Go to YouTube, Google anything. You can find knowledge about any subject that you want out there. Honestly, probably too much knowledge. Probably to the point where there's misinformation out there, right? Or disinformation. But at a certain point, you got to understand why you're looking for that knowledge. If you don't have a solid why you're doing what you're doing, it's useless, right? I mean, and if you don't have the why, if you have the strong enough why, you will find a way to get things done. And that's what entrepreneurs is really about, right? I mean, nowadays it's probably easier than ever before to start off and become an entrepreneur, right? Online, the internet makes it super, super easy, barely an inconvenience. But the other part of things on the other side is like, if you don't it's too easy almost, right? To the point where it's to start. It's not easy being an entrepreneur. It's easy to start being an entrepreneur, right? To try to be one. Once you get in there though, if you don't have the right reasons for getting into it, if you don't have the right why that drives you, you're gonna stop. You're gonna quit halfway through because it's gonna be like, oh, this is too hard. It's not easy. It's not as easy as I thought it was gonna be. And I love that you mentioned that for folks, because you can easily spend $200,000 just on certifications after you get certified by the ICF, right?
Right. And you're not making money. And it's like, well, okay, now you're in severe debt and you still don't have any clients, Yes.
Exactly. And we can do a whole nother, we could actually do a whole nother thing about coaching. And that's why you know this about me. I'm focusing more on the coaching business of coaching rather than the practice of coaching, because there's a lot about the practice of coaching, right? You can get certified in anything you want under the sun, literally. I mean, there's certifications about, just about certain small little pieces of coaching that are really awesome, about great tools. But at the same time, you can have all the tools in the world. If you don't know why you're using them or why you want to use them, it's useless, right? I mean, think about people you see that have like 14 different like sets of letters after their name, right? They probably spend a lot of money to get those letters, right? But does that change who they are as a person? So anyway, we're right up on time. We got 33 minutes, but I want to give you a chance, like any last minute thoughts you want to share with folks, anything like that. We'll put Reem's information in the bottom, in the description after the fact, but anything you want to share last minute before we jump out of here?
No, I mean, nothing profound. I think this was like a great conversation. I think it's an ongoing conversation. I am very passionate about just entrepreneurship. And I truly, really, I really do believe this. As long as you have confidence in yourself and like what you're selling or what service, like you'll make it work. I think a lot of times people, I miss this all the time, feel like much smarter than me, but they're not able to like sell their products. They don't believe in like themselves. So I just think a lot of it just comes from that. Like you just, they say like fake it till you become it. So I think that's true. And thank you for opening this space up for us today. This was fun.
No, that's awesome. I'm not going to say anything else topic in terms of content, because you ended on a perfect note. I think that's exactly where we want to end here. I couldn't have said it better. Reem, thank you for joining us. Honestly, it was great times. For those folks who are interested, coaches out there who may want to join the BIPOC Coach Collective, we'll put that information and Reem's information in the description below. Thank you again to Reem for joining us. Thank you as always, Hannah, for everything. Kandria, Rahul, thanks for tuning in. Thanks to everyone else who tuned in and is tuning in after the fact. If you guys like the video, like, subscribe, and share. And I'll see you guys next time. Take care.
Thanks.